You are standing in a marketplace. A man hands you a bundle of grain and speaks a promise. You have no way to record it. You have no way to check it later. You have to trust his face, his voice, his memory, because that is the only ledger that exists. What if humans never discovered writing? It almost happened that way. For nearly 200,000 years, anatomically modern humans lived, loved, and organized entire societies without a single written word. Writing is not old. It is one of the youngest tools your species ever built. The earliest confirmed writing system, Sumerian cuneiform, appears at the site of Uruk in modern-day Iraq only around 3,400 BCE. That means for over 95% of human history, there was no writing at all. So why did it happen at all? And what tips the balance between a species that remembers everything by mouth and one that starts carving symbols into clay? The archaeologist Denise Schmant-Besserat spent years studying small clay tokens found across the ancient Near East. Cones, spheres, discs, simple shapes. She showed that these tokens were used for counting goods, sheep, jars of oil, bundles of grain, thousands of years before anyone wrote a single sentence. Slowly, people began pressing these tokens into wet clay to leave an impression before sealing them inside. Then someone realized something important. Why keep the token at all when the impression alone told you what was inside? That impression is the ancestor of writing, not poetry, not prayer, an inventory system. Writing was born from bookkeeping. Here's a divergence point. Imagine that moment never happens. Imagine the tokens stay tokens. Imagine no one presses a wedge-shaped reed into wet clay to record a debt, a harvest, a trade. Villages grow. Cities grow. Trade grows. But memory stays the only ledger. What tips history away from that path is scale. Once a settlement holds thousands of people trading across long distances, spoken memory starts to fail under the weight of it. Writing survives in our timeline because it solves a problem that oral memory physically cannot. But if population density had grown more slowly, if trade networks had stayed small and local, that pressure might never have built. The tokens might have stayed tokens forever. So picture that world. Picture it in full. Every law lives in the memory of an elder, and it changes slightly every time it is retold. There is no fixed text of anything, because nothing can be fixed. A king's decree is only as permanent as the last person who heard it and repeated it correctly. Trade still happens, but it depends entirely on reputation, on witnesses, on rituals designed to make an oral promise feel unbreakable. Some cultures in our own history relied on exactly this. The Inca built an enormous empire without a writing system in the way we usually define it. Instead, they used a quipu, a system of knotted colored cords, studied extensively by anthropologist Gary Urton, who showed that these knots likely encoded not just numbers, but administrative and even narrative information. In a world with no writing anywhere, something like the quipu or something like it becomes the backbone of every civilization on Earth. Complex, physical, tactile record keeping, instead of the flat page. Religion changes completely. Every sacred story is preserved only through trained memory specialists, people whose entire life's work is holding a single unbroken oral chain going back generations. This is not imagination. It already happened in our own timeline. The Rigveda, one of the oldest religious texts in the world, was composed and transmitted with extraordinary precision purely through oral recitation for many centuries before it was ever written down, preserved through strict memorization techniques designed to prevent even a single syllable from drifting. In a world with no writing at all, ever, this becomes the only method humanity has. Every temple needs its memorizers. Every empire needs its rememberers. Forgetting becomes one of the most feared things society can experience, because there is no backup copy of anything. No backup copy of a law. No backup copy of a treaty. No backup copy of you. And here is the twist, the part that should stop you. This world might not be less advanced. It might, in some ways, be more impressive. Studies on oral societies with strong memory training, including research into Australian Aboriginal songlines by scholars like Lynn Kelly, reveal memory systems capable of encoding enormous amounts of precise geographic, ecological, and historical information, passed accurately across many generations, without a single written symbol. Kelly's research suggests these memory techniques could store knowledge equivalent to entire encyclopedias, wrapped inside song, dance, and landscape. Without writing, humans may not become less intelligent. Human memory itself may become dramatically more powerful, trained the way an athlete trains a muscle, because it has to be. In this alternate timeline, you might carry inside your own head a memory capacity most humans today would find almost unbelievable. But there's a darker side to it too. Without writing, science slows to a crawl. Every discovery has to be retaught, person to person, generation to generation, and every retelling is a chance of the discovery to be lost, distorted, or forgotten completely before it can be built upon. In our real timeline, the astronomer Claudius Ptolemy could write down centuries of accumulated observation in a single text, letting future scholars start from where he ended, not from zero. Without writing, most of that accumulated knowledge simply evaporates within a few generations. Technology still exists, but advances at a fraction of the speed, bottlenecked by the limits of a single human lifetime and a single human memory. Empires would struggle to coordinate across long distances. Laws would fracture into countless local variations the moment they left a ruler's direct voice. History itself would blur, because history depends on someone writing down what happened before the people who remembered it firsthand are gone. Now think about your own body, right now, reading these words. Your brain was not designed for writing. There is no single writing center you were born with. When you learn to read, your brain repurposed regions originally evolved for object recognition and spoken language, an adaptation confirmed by neuroscientific research into literacy's effect on brain structure, including studies led by cognitive neuroscientist Stanislas Dehaene. Every time you read a text message, a street sign, a caption, you are using neural pathways that were never meant for this task, borrowed and reshaped by a 5,000-year-old invention. In the alternate timeline, those same neural pathways would have developed differently. Your visual cortex would still exist. Your language centers would still exist, but the specific wiring that lets you silently decode black marks on a white page as words would likely never form the way it does now, because nothing would have trained it to, which brings you back to the marketplace. In our real timeline, someone presses a reed into wet clay to record a debt about a jar of oil, and from that single unglamorous act, an entire chain reaction begins. Contracts, laws, letters, Ptolemy's star charts, sacred texts, your name on a birth certificate, every book you have ever read, every text message you have ever sent. All of it traces back to a bookkeeping problem in an ancient city, thousands of years before anyone thought to call it writing at all. You are standing in a marketplace. A man hands you a bundle of grain and speaks a promise. This time, you do not have to trust his memory. You pull out a small tablet, and the promise is already written down. Somewhere behind that simple, ordinary act, thousands of years of divergence collapse into a single fact about the world you actually live in. Writing did happen, and it changed absolutely everything.